Hi, this is Larry Kirwan, and you have the great pleasure of listening to Retrospectives with the inestimable John Broughton on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Now the day is done. Take the subway home.
Well, let's go way back to begin with. Tell us about your very early bands back in the 70s prior to Black 47.
Well, I came over to the U.S. with a guy from my hometown, Pierce Turner, and we had a duo called Turner and Kirwan of Wexford, which was the hardest name that was ever invented. I think people couldn't say it. But it was a mixture of Irish folk music and psychedelia, I'd say, for want of a better word. People called it Irish astute rock.
Mm-hmm.
So we played around New York a lot. And then when the punk explosion happened, we were living pretty close to CBGB's, and we turned that into a band called Major Thinkers. And that was kind of a punk pop band. And we got a record deal with CBS and everything. And then when we got dropped by CBS, I decided to get out of the music business and become a playwright. And I did that for 4 years in the late 80s, and then I got the longing again to get back on stage. So I continued the two careers that way, one with Black 47 and being a playwright on the side or in the downtime, which there's a lot of in the music business.
So was there any one thing in particular that pulled that trigger to want you to return to music?
Yeah, oddly enough, it was that I was becoming quieter and more just really focused on the playwriting. I didn't go out anymore, so there was a whole public side of my personality, I think, that was suffering for it. I didn't really want to hang out with people, so I just got totally into characters.
Yeah.
So I was actually out walking. I've been working. I was working on a play, and I got stuck on something. I thought I really want to hear some Irish accents. I was living in the East Village, which there are no Irish people there, and I decided to walk uptown. And I was passing a pub called Paddy Riley's, and there was a band playing in there, and I heard the music. I hadn't been on stage in a long time, and when I went in, one of the guys in the band recognized me from the Major Thinkers days and asked me to come up and play with them. And I had a couple of shots of whiskey and got up and played. And then at the end of the night, this guy, his name was Chris Byrne, who was a New York policeman, who was moonlighting. He was feeling a bit down. I said, "What's the problem?" And he said, "Well, the band I'm in tonight is breaking up, and we have all these dates for the next couple of months, and I need the money." And I said, "Well, I'll do them with you." And then there and then we decided to form Black 47, and we already had gigs ready, so we just had a couple of quick rehearsals. At those times, you had to play 4 sets a night in the Irish bars that he was playing in. So we just got 4 sets together, but we're determined that this band would do all original music as quickly as we could. So I hadn't written songs in a long time, so there was this kind of outpouring of songs that were obviously kind of just waiting to come out at this point. Mm. So Black 47 started to play really quickly and got a following pretty quickly too.
So was there a specific blueprint for the type of band you wanted it to be, or did it just evolve naturally in time?
I think that we wanted to be a band that stayed alive. That's one thing, because these bars where we had the gigs were in the Bronx, in a real rough Irish working class place, where they really only wanted to hear cover songs. So here were we coming in playing songs like Home of the Brave and Paddy's Got a Brand New Reel. And my experience right before this had been, playing in CBGBs, playing in the punk places. So they didn't want their bands to be in your face. They wanted to be to bring their dates along, and hear music in the background. Whereas our idea was, we're here, listen to us. So just survival was the first thing I was thinking of. And then just trying to figure out how to make things work with the new songs I was writing. I was using a drum machine, programming in hip-hop and reggae beats and rock beats into it. And so we had this big sound straight away, and big aggressive sound, even though there was only two of us. So it wasn't really a plan. It was just to be original and to stay alive.
As you mentioned, you didn't make a great first impression with the local Irish American audiences there. What triggered a change of heart in them?
Well, actually, we didn't go well with the native Irish audiences. That's who we were playing to, because the area we were playing in was called Bainbridge Avenue, and there were about 30 bars around there.
Okay.
Most of whom had Irish music, and it was the area that all the Irish immigrants lived in. So the Irish didn't want us because they wanted to hear, more Christy Moore or U2 or the Pogues, whatever was popular at that time in late 89, 1990. So they didn't like it, so we would get fired every night. But there was a new bar to go to, and there were very few bands, oddly enough, but they needed music in each of the bars. So we would play a different bar every night, usually get fired, and go on to the next bar. And then by the time we would have done the 30 bars, someone would have sold one, we'd start all over again. But by then we were starting to get better, and we started to attract an Irish-American audience, which was strange because we thought it would be the native Irish would like us, but instead it was the Irish-American young people, because for the first time there was a band that was kind of dealing with their issues and were dealing with the same rhythms that they were hearing on the radio, the hip-hop and reggae and rock rhythms. So without realizing it, we became their band.
Mm. I've seen you quoted as being that people felt you were the house band of the city of New York, so obviously you had a great connection with that city. What about back home in your homeland of Ireland? How was the band's relationship with that country?
With Ireland?
With Ireland itself, yeah.
It wasn't good because on top of everything else, we were very political. Mm. We had big questions about the British problem in the north of Ireland. So, which was the way most Irish Americans felt. So we weren't really thinking of Ireland after the first couple of months because the native Irish didn't particularly care for us that much. So we were more focused on that we were a New York band dealing with Irish American issues and dealing with Irish issues at the same time. And that didn't go so well in Ireland. At first, I didn't really know about us that much in Ireland, but then when we became really popular in New York and got a record deal and our records were starting to be released over there, we always had a following, but the press and radio weren't that keen on us. For one thing, you couldn't play certain of our songs in Ireland because of the Section 31, where you couldn't have any kind of music that espoused any kind of Republican thought. So we were pretty much banned in Ireland without anyone saying so. And in England, the record companies were thinking, oh my God, what is this? These guys can write really good songs, but at the same time, they're actually criticizing Mrs. Thatcher and whatever. So it was confusing, I think, to people over there. But we didn't care. When you're living in New York, it's, Ireland and England are pretty far away. You're at the center of the universe at that point before the internet hit. Yeah. New York was very much at that kind of thing, we were being written about and on television all the time. So you're not really caring about the rest of the world. You know, the U.S. was a big place, and it was plenty of places to play in. So you're living from gig to gig, really, and album to album. You know, we were really dedicated to releasing a lot of music and to reflecting what was going on at the time in New York and the U.S.
You were very much a political band, but listening to your music through the years, I've never felt like I was being preached to or being hit over the head with your views. I saw it more as reporting or storytelling. Was it important to you not to come across as preachy?
Yeah, very much. I hated preachy music. But one of the things that had happened, too, without me realizing it, in the 4 years I took off to become a playwright, when I came back to writing music, it happened overnight. We needed 4 sets of original music really quickly. You know, a band that would be an original band would usually just need 1 set, a 45-minute set or whatever at that point. We needed 2 hours of original music. And all of a sudden, I realized, I didn't even realize it at first, but I was writing from a character perspective all the time because that was the training I'd gotten from writing plays. So I tended to be writing through a character. But the whole idea of preachy political music is awful to me. It's just what I was trying to do with it, say with a song like James Connolly, was to write about what he was about, but then in the center of some of these songs go into an internal dialogue. So it was really moving songwriting forward a certain way without even realizing it, because that's what you would do in a play. You would almost have a soliloquy at some point. So I was tending to do that. So I think that took away some of the preachier stuff, because when you're dealing with a person, it's very easy to see straight away, no preaching. You know, if this guy sounds preachy, he doesn't sound real. You're dealing with the inner qualities of the person. What makes him do something, There's this conflict within everyone. Like, why would a guy like James Connolly, who had been in the British Army, rise up in 1916 against the British, knowing he was going to be shot? What makes him do that, seeing he has a wife and a young family? So I was dealing with it more from a personal point of view. If you deal with the personal, you tend to get away with the preachy, get away from the preachiness pretty easily.
Were you ever under any record company pressure to tone down the political nature of your music?
We were very much our own thing, and we were, I wouldn't say arrogant, but, the last thing we would have listened to was a record company person. I had been under some pressure when I was with major thinkers, so I knew what it was like and very much how to deflect it. But, American record companies weren't thinking in that sense, or our record companies weren't. We were getting great reviews for actually being political. I remember Bob Marley was dead, the Clash had broken up, Joe Strummer was kind of a champion of Black 47. So we were this political band that people were kind of proud that there is a political band actually out there that are making statements. So we wouldn't have listened to it anyway as it was. So
yeah.
One thing I find about record companies is you hear about all this pressure that comes on them, but that only comes on if you allow it to happen. If you make it clear, listen, mate, you're talking to Black 47, you're not talking to whoever, Do you have some particular point of view on this political thing? It wouldn't have happened with us,
You did build up a very a loyal and enthusiastic fan base, and I saw an article where they were described as politically astute deadheads. Would you call that an accurate description?
There were two types of people, a lot of different types of people, but two basic groups of people that came to see us. There were political people, or people who were aware of it, and then there were party people who wouldn't have really known. They had a vague idea of the politics, but we weren't just about politics. We were also about entertaining the people, and we were a working class band. So if somebody back at that point paid $10 to come in and see you, they were going to get a show. And we were able to swivel. I don't know. It's one of the things that kind of amazes me now looking back on it, how we were able to go from, you know, a real party song into a very serious political song, and then back into a different type of song without any problems. People came to accept that was the Black 47 way, and it was all done with real passion. So I think the passion knit everything together. So yeah, there were some political deadheads there, but there were also people who wanted a night out and wanted to forget their cares, and that's what we were about too.
The band almost seemed to have something of a jinx upon it at one point. There was a series of horrible events that happened, including a shooting, no less, at one of your gigs. It must have been tough to cope with all of that at that particular time. Was the continuance of the band under any threat at any stage?
Yeah, that went on for about 3 years, and it was like it was a boulder up on a cliff ready to roll down on top of you. It was just one thing after another. Our soundman fell out my window and got killed, and we had this huge crash on the highway that I still dream about. Luckily, none of us were badly hurt in it. And the shooting happened it was on a St. Patrick's night, and a cop who was enjoying himself and had a new gun, and a security man asked him to, you know, it was showing, and he said, you know, it's not loaded, and he took it out and went bang, and it was awful because the bullet ricocheted, and oddly enough, it struck my wife, and it struck the road manager's wife in different parts of a balcony. It was just one thing after another, and a number of other things happened. But no, you know, we were very focused on gigs and recording. You know, we did something like 2,500 gigs over a 25-year period. So there was always the next gig to get to. And when you're focused on playing, you can put a lot of these things out of your mind, you know. And then we were always writing for the next album. So when you're focused like that, you know, it's like being life in wartime, you know. If a guy is in the army, you know, he's getting shot at sometimes, but then there's the other times that you're just you're carrying on, you know. It never occurred to us to break up over or anything like that.
Yeah. You've had numerous avenues for your writing through the years, like you mentioned, writing plays, books, and of course songs. Do they all help each other? For example, does being a playwright help make you a better songwriter and so on?
Well, it makes you a different one. I think the practice of playwriting, which a lot of people think is just putting dialogue in people's mouths, but basically it's how do you say something in as few words as possible so that the actor can get on about interpreting the character. So yeah, that really helps. The three things are quite different, although they come from the same source: novel writing, playwriting, and songwriting. You employ different parts of your literary abilities, I suppose, to do them, but they definitely help each other, probably in a way that you're able to stand back a little bit. But when it comes to songs are still the mystical thing. I know how I'm writing a play right now, and I know how to write a play. I know how to write a novel, though they're tough. There's a way you work about it. With the song, it's tricky because it's magical. It's that moment when the words and the music hit each other and spark. And I don't know, to this day, I don't know how that happens. You just consider yourself really lucky that it happens, and there's no magic way about it. You know, you can't sit around waiting for it, although it does come sometimes like that. But you've got to find ways to kind of coax it to come out and be in the right circumstances. And when the hammer hits the anvil, as it were, and the spark comes out, you better grab it while it's there, because that spark is gone in an instant. You know, you can never say, well, it'll come back to me tomorrow. You gotta, whenever it is, you gotta get up and do it, you know.
So is getting your message out there and condensing it into a 4-minute song and having it just right, is that what you find most personally gratifying out of the other formats of writing that you do?
Well, that's a very special moment. I guess what it is when you write a song, there is this real feeling. It's almost like sex, you know. Something has happened at that particular point in time, and it was very pleasurable and gratifying. That happens when you write a song. When you're writing a play or a novel, it's a real ongoing thing. You may get moments of exhilaration when you have a breakthrough, you know. But then there's the long periods when you're just slogging. You know, I'm writing a musical on Iraq, of all things, on the war in Iraq right now, and it's just really tough. You know, you got to walk through all this underbrush, and then at some point, you know, you look back and you've cleared a path. You know, that's the playwriting and the novel writing way of doing it. Mm-hmm. I also had great experience in writing with Tom Keneally. You're Tom Keneally, Thomas Keneally.
Yeah.
We wrote a musical that we collaborated on for years called Transport, about the Irish women that were sent to Australia, you know, for small crimes like stealing a loaf of bread or whatever. His wife Judy's great-grandmother had been sent out that way, and Tom wanted to tell the story of it. And he got in touch with me when he was in New York at one point and said, you know, would you like to do this? I was thinking, yeah, definitely, because, you know, I've done somewhat the same thing for Irish emigration. To do it for Australian emigration would just seem like this great opportunity. And then Tom is just such a wonderful novelist. So working with him, because he was moving into a field of playwriting that he's not as familiar with, was really interesting to knock sparks between us and to come up with something. And we finally did. Transport was done here in New York a couple of years ago. So I learned a lot from watching Tom go from the novelistic thing to the playwright thing, whereas I was bringing the songwriting part of it and the playwriting part into it. So seeing that the three things collide with someone as sensitive and as together as Tom was a wonderful experience.
Through the years, did your procedure or method of songwriting vary much from song to song, or do you pretty much stay true to the same formula all the way through?
You know, it's almost like you're trying to trick the genie inside you to get it to come out. So whatever works. You know, I had some success recently with a musical called Hard Times, which is about the draft riots in New York City in 1863, and about an area in New York called the 5 Points. And as it turned out, Stephen Foster, the American songwriter, had lived in the 5 Points at this period of time. So I decided to use a lot of his songs and combined them with some of my own. So that was really interesting, how to update Stephen Foster without losing the magic or the controversy he had by, singing plantation songs. So, you always try and challenge yourself to come up with new ways, or put yourself in a situation where it demands new ways to deal with, to bring songs out. So I'm always aware of that, not to fall into traps, because it's very easy to write the same song over and over. I guess with Black 47 too, I was really aware of that trap, because you're getting up on stage to do 4 sets, that you become really aware that you want each song to sound different, And that was one of the great things about playing with a band like Black 47. Each of the members of it, there were 2 horns, sax, trombone, and uilleann pipes, and then a rhythm section, guitar, bass, and drums. So it was a wide palette to deal with, and each of the guys came from different backgrounds, musical backgrounds. So we were able to take those backgrounds and, have one song sound like a New Orleans song, another like a trad jazz song, another be like a downtown noise type song, or a reggae song, or hip hop song. So I was always looking for those avenues to make the songwriting different.
Mm. Now, after 25 years, you finally put the band to bed. Looking back now, are you happy that you achieved everything that you wanted to achieve in that 25 years?
Well, it was a wild run, because of being political and controversial, and being kind of on the cutting edge of Irish and immigrant and rock music, and yet being, involved with many political issues. There's a certain part of it was like a blur, the one thing I said we did is we never gave in to anything. We just had our vision, and that was it, I think there's probably other things we could have achieved, but we weren't really able to, because for one thing, we all lived from the band, so no matter what, we had to play. So it might have been better for us to play less tactically and not be in people's faces so much, but that was the nature of the band, that we were living from it, and we were living the music as we went along. So it was very much a day-to-day thing. There was very little time to stop and think, maybe I should take a couple of months off and see where this thing is going and try and shape it in some way. Mm-hmm. There was always a new gig to get to, a new album to do, a new fire to put out. It was a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
To be in a really good rock and roll band, especially in the 90s and the 2000s, we were affected by a lot of things too. 9/11 was a huge point here in New York that affected the band. We were, as you said, the house band of New York City at that point. So it was a responsibility to play through that and to be there for all the first responders, the cops and the firemen, the EMS people, and to bring people back into the city. And then right after that, we got hit with the Iraq War, and we came out so strongly against it. So we lost a certain amount of our right-wing audience. We always had a huge left wing, a huge center, and a huge right wing, and we lost a lot of the right wing for about 3 or 4 years. Then when everybody realized the war was stupid anyway, and then they started to come back. But the war was was a tough time for the band because, people were walking out in the middle of sets, and every night you had to do it because, no one else was doing it at the time, or no one else was doing it on a consistent basis. And we felt that Black 47, being a political band, had to stand up for the troops who were over there, for one thing. A lot of them were our fans, and they were playing Black 47 music. So we felt, that this issue had to be in the forefront of what we were doing for those 4 or 5 years of the first 4 or 5 years of the war. After that, people who grew tired of the war anyway, but there was always something like that. And then there was the bankers and gangsters thing right after it. There's always something, if you're political. There's never, you can say, this year's not going to be political, I'll take a break from this type of thing.
Yeah. You're doing a bit of radio yourself these days. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I always loved radio. I never liked television. Television to me always seems so boring. You know what's going to happen in 90%, 99% of TV shows, and TV political reporting is so lame too. When did you ever learn anything from it,
Mm-hmm.
But radio was always great to me. So during one of the publicity campaigns, 11 years ago, actually, this month, we released an album and a book called Elvis Murphy's Green Suede Shoes. I had a book, a memoir, Green Suede Shoes, and so we wrote an album around it. And I was up at Sirius XM, which is satellite radio, which is very big in the U.S. and Canada. It was kind of starting off at that point. I was doing an interview and with a woman called Meg Griffin, who is a pretty famous DJ host. And we were great friends. We were out in the corridor laughing after the interview. And one of the executives walked by, and he heard my Irish accent. He called Meg over and said, "Can this guy talk?" And she said, "Put a couple of pints in him and he'll talk forever." And so he said, "Well, would you like to do a radio show? Because we have no Celtic show on." So she came back and said, "This guy wants to know, would you do a radio show?" I said, "Sure, I love radio." And so I was in a week later doing a show that we came up with, a 3-hour music and talk show called Celtic Crush. And the only provision I made is I do it. I pick the songs, I produce it, and they were very happy with that. Save the producer and so it's been going 11 years, and it's grown a lot because it's kind of free form. I play 3 songs, and then I talk about the songs, or I talk about whatever the songs inspire in me after that talk, or ending from 2 to 5 minutes, and that's the show. Then 3 hours of that, and I do a 5-minute kind of what would you call it, a soliloquy at the beginning of the show, where I will pick the songs and know what the theme is going to be, and then it's whatever happens, whatever the rest of the songs that I've picked inspire as we go along. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing it, and it never gets old, and people seem to appreciate it.
I just wanted to move on to a book that you did about the history of Irish music. So that must have been a real labour of love for you.
Yeah, it's a history of Irish music rather than the history. It was, as Black 47 was coming to an end, we decided to do a tour, about a 15-month tour, and then we would finish up on the 25th anniversary of our first gig. So as we began that, all these memories started to come back of this, because we played for anyone who'd ever hired us. That was one of the things we decided to do. So all these memories started to come back, and I started to write down some of them, and I realized that, I had seen Irish music and been a part of it, it's through some of the great eras of it. So, and then with working on Celtic Crush, the radio program, I was talking about a lot of those memories, and I decided to write them down in a book and trace Irish music as I had seen it, as an onlooker and someone who was concerned with it. So I began back in my hometown of Wexford of going back and remembering how I got into music and tracing it forward then to seminal guys like Sean O'Rita, who basically combined traditional Irish music and European classical music, and moving on through all the different characters that I'd seen, the show bands, which were unique to Ireland, and then seminal figures like Rory Gallagher and Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, and having been a boy and been enchanted with these guys, but I was able to give a bird's eye view of what it was like to witness Irish music happening. And I wanted to get it down too while I was still in a band that was playing, because I felt that musicians hadn't really given their account of music beyond their own music. What it's like, what way do we see music? Because it's different than writers looking at it, and it's different than the audience looking at it. You are part of the audience, but you're also a musician, and you're hearing it and seeing it in a different way. And you also know what the musician is going through, that it's not all just getting out on the stage, those 2 hours of bliss. There's all the business side of it you have to deal with, and being away from home, the personal choices you have to make. So that I decided to put it all down in that book. And people like it, I think, because they are seeing it through a musician's eyes.
Yeah. What about performing live yourself these days, Larry, in this post-Black 47 world? I'm assuming you're not racking up the sort of numbers of gigs that the band was, but how have you found the transition?
Well, it's interesting because I'm out on stage on my own, so I'm doing quite a number of the Black 47 songs and then some new ones. And it's a big standard to live up to, I have to be careful with the new songs that they get to the same standard the Black 47 ones get to, and so I'm careful of that. But also with the Black 47 songs, it's just me and a guitar. So I tend to get a little more into the backstories of the song to let people know what they're about, and then deal with them in a very lyrical way rather than the wild music way. The way Black 47 would do it, and I was very much part of that too, is you have the lyrics, and then you have the instrumental parts of it, and you can stretch out the instrumental parts of it as long as you like. But now being I don't have the band anymore, I have to deal more totally with the lyrical side of things, which is great because there's certain things that come up in the songs that I had missed because of being able to depend on the great instrumentalists in Black 47 expounding on that musically. Now I have to do it lyrically, find what the center of the songs, find what the soul of the songs are about. So it's still an exploratory thing, and it's a lot of fun like that. But it's just you up on stage, so there's almost a naked feeling to it. There's nothing to hide behind anymore.
Yeah.
you got to get into the soul of the song and find it, and that, I guess, is going back to the playwright thing. But I've gotten more into musical theater too. It was something I was heading towards anyway, and the play, the musical I was talking to, Hard Times, looks like it's going to have a a big life. It's been developed as a big musical right now that I'm involved with. So yeah, life goes on. You know, I'm not playing as many gigs, but I think that's good too. You know, one for the 25 years I was in Black 47. I loved being on the road. It was just that feeling because of the camaraderie with the band. And then the night it ended, it was almost like I had to put that behind me and say, now what do I do? And I realized I don't want to get out and travel the country like I had been doing, like with Black 47. It'd be a bit lonely, you know, just on your own out there. You know, I've never minded being on my own, but I didn't have this huge desire to go back to all the places I'd been to in the U.S. before. I mean, going to a new country would be different, you know. Maybe I'll come to Australia this time. Something like that would be interesting, you know, but I didn't want to go over the same ground.
Yeah. Well, Larry, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute treat and an honour to speak with you. Thank you for all the wonderful, thought-provoking songs over the years, and we're sure there's still plenty more to come.
Yeah, well, thank you, John, and I'd like to thank the Australian people who supported Black 47 over the years. There was a period when we were getting released in Australia, particularly with Green Suede Shoes, and I used to get so many letters from people saying how much they enjoyed it. So for the Black 47 fans alive in Australia still, God bless you.
Yeah, we're still here. All the best, Larry. Thanks so much.
Yeah, one song, if you're doing the thing about Tom Keneally, if you're using that section, there's a song recorded by Black 47, which is from that production. It's on the Bankers and Gangsters album. I think it's the last track on there. It's Gaelic. It's Boss, B-A-S, and then I-N, and then Aaron, E-I-R-E-A-N-N. And that's the opening number of the musical Transport. It means death in Ireland. That's what the women wanted. It's an old emigrant saying that you wish for death in Ireland because it means you made it back to the country. So I took that title as the opening number.
Lovely. We will use that as a segue. Thank you.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks again, Larry.
Great, John.
All the best.
Will you let me know when it's on, too, because I've got some friends over there in Australia. I'd love to let them know.
Absolutely. So. When I've got an air date, I'll send you an email, let you know.
Great. Thanks, man.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.